Lawyers, what's the quickest way a courtroom went from normal to chaos? I sat in on a personal injury case where the plaintiff broke their arm in an accident and had a doctor on the stand as an expert. The woman's lawyer begins questioning the doctor about their experience with arm injuries. She was a well-known orthopedic surgeon in the area. The lawyer asks if she's ever treated a vulnar fracture. The arm bones are ulnar and radius, to which she only answers no. Then the lawyer starts grilling her with questions about the vulnar. All the while, the judge has a small smile on his face. I knew that this wasn't going to end well for this lawyer. After about 6 to 7 questions, lawyer asks, how did you get a medical license and have been able to practice medicine this long if you've never treated a vulnar fracture? And begins a small rant about going after her credentials and those that gave it to her, to which she simply responds, there is no bone named the vulnar. The courtroom erupts in laughter. Even the judge is laughing. It takes more minutes than anyone would like to admit to get the court back in order. The woman's lawyer quietly states that she is done with her examination and sits next to her client. The rest of the case went by as normal, but I've never seen a courtroom erupt like that before. I heard months later that the lawyer moved out of state. I was representing a young man that was trying to get a restraining order against his ex-boyfriend. I'll call my client Jeremy, and the ex, Chad. Chad was a real piece of work. He called all hours of the night. He showed up and banged on Jeremy's door, almost getting him kicked out of his apartment. Chad would come into his job and scream at him. He managed to catch him alone in a parking lot and threaten Jeremy with a knife. Chad also attempted to sexually assault him on more than one occasion. Chad was unhinged. The day of the hearing, we show up early and I stay with Jeremy the entire time. The poor kid was shaking like a leaf and didn't have an ounce of color in his face. I knew the second Chad got there because Jeremy went rigid. I'm in no way an intimidating man, but I stood between Jeremy and Chad, blocking Jeremy from Chad's view. Thankfully, Jeremy's dad showed up shortly afterwards. The man had just gotten off a plane and rushed there as quickly as possible. He was a much bigger man than me, and I knew it would make Jeremy feel safer to have him there. We walked into the courtroom. Chad was staring Jeremy down. We get into the proceedings and everything seems like it's going well. We have more than enough evidence. I have several witnesses lined up. We are going to get this restraining order. We get towards the end of the whole thing when it happened. Chad had somehow managed to sneak a gun into the courthouse. He pulled it out and started yelling. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Jeremy being lifted and pulled over the divider. His dad lifted him, pulled him over, and threw himself over him. Everyone was screaming, and bailiffs were rushing towards Chad. It was over in a few minutes and Chad was dragged off to a cell. Needless to say, we got the restraining order and Jeremy was able to finish his degree and get out of the state. This was a sad one. It was not a fun case. I was representing a woman who I'll call Betty. Betty and her husband were divorcing and were in the midst of a custody battle. Betty was trying to keep her kids because her husband, Ross, was extremely verbally abusive towards them. The issue was that Betty had to move in with a friend of hers in a house that wasn't quite big enough for everyone. Ross was charming and was painting Betty as a horrible mother and a drug addict, neither of which was true. The kids were terrified of Ross, and you could tell, but they were too young to be included. We were losing. Ross had some friends in high places helping him out. The judge came back with a ruling. Sole custody to Ross. The eldest child must have understood and started screaming and crying, which set off the other two. All you could hear was the kid screaming no. The judge stopped and told Ross to get his children under control. Ross went to walk over to them, and they screamed even harder. The eldest ran over to his mother and held her tight. The other two followed, and soon the children were sniffling into their mother's shirt. The judge called me and the other lawyer up to the stand. He told us that he was reversing his own ruling and was requiring the children be put into counseling. It was the only time I've seen an outburst like that work in my favor. Edit. The kids are doing great and Betty found a new house a few months after the court date. I'm a family law attorney, so I see a lot of people at their worst. But one case was absolutely disgusting. I originally started out taking some pro bono cases, where the court specifically linked attorneys up with people with disabilities, who could not afford attorneys. Generally, these people were very nice, and I enjoyed working with them to get the help they needed. But this one woman, she was a complete piece of garbage. I didn't generally get much information prior to meeting with these clients, and so I went into most initial meetings blind. When I walked into the room, I was initially confused because the woman didn't look like she applied to the program. She had a Michael Kors purse, an Apple Watch, and a Burberry trench coat. Keep in mind that one of the major factors for getting my help was intransigence. I got some information after that she continually used a significantly minor disability to get free legal aid to, in essence, harass her ex-husband. We began talking, and she told me about how her ex was abusive to her children. I listened to her story and it actually made a lot of sense. Her son, who was nearly 18, actually left her ex's home to come live with her, and her daughter had made a 911 call which I read the transcript of. So, I looked at the file and was a little confused to see that this woman had lost all visitation rights to both her kids. This was a big deal because it almost never happens. Even drug-addled parents generally get supervised visitation. She had nothing. When I asked what happened, she told me that the judge was corrupt. I knew the judge well, so I told her that I didn't believe that was the case. She then proceeded to regale me with information about how the judge was in a secret lesbian relationship with her ex's now wife. Once that was out, it was all she ever talked about. She had pieces written online about it. She actively told me time after time that she could prove it. She talked about it more than she talked about her kids. Fast forward to a couple of weeks before the hearing and I get a stack of printed text messages from the opposing attorney with hundreds, if not thousands, of texts between her and the daughter she was to have absolutely no contact with by court order. The texts went from bad to worse. The daughter was 8th grade or so, and it was clear the mom was manipulating the daughter to skip school and have secret rendezvous where the mother would buy her expensive clothing. So that was definitely a major strike against her and was most likely enough to deny any request she was seeking. But there was so much more, including racial slurs, bigoted generalities, and constant coaching to leave her ex's care. The worst though was a text chain where the daughter actually called her stepmom a slur, which clearly indicated her mom had been feeding her the secret lesbian relationship ideals. The daughter had said that the dad was drunk, and the mom replied something vague about how the stepmom wasn't getting any that night with her dad being drunk. The daughter asked what she meant, and the mom, to her 8th grade daughter, replied, "Broke wiener." We lost well before the hearing happened. At the hearing, the judge, different from the one the mom hated, did what every reasonable judge would do and denied the request. At which point, the mother stood up and started yelling in front of a full courtroom that everyone there was in on the lesbo bonanza. She continued to yell and scream every racial and sexuality based slur she could come up with. Eventually, the bailiffs were able to get her to stop. She was held in contempt and ordered to pay a fee for every day the other child wasn't returned to the father's care. She said that she didn't give a flying F and she would just pay the fee. At this point, the judge said, "Well, if that's the case, I will annotate the file to inform court admin that you should be able to pay for your own attorney going forward." I lost the hearing, but damn did that loss feel good. I'm not a lawyer, but I watched an entire traffic courtroom collectively lose their minds. I had to go to traffic court for a speeding ticket. The officer told me I was going 6 over, but wrote the ticket for 12 over. I was there to contest it. Right after the judge explained how the day was going to go, there was a buzzing in the back of the quiet courtroom. Suddenly, a voice from the back loudly exclaims, "What do you mean? Male celebrity is dead." The courtroom is in an uproar in seconds. People are crying and yelling. It was so very strange. Eventually, the judge called for order. It took some time, but everyone calmed back down. The rest of the day was uneventful. Also, if anyone cares, I got my entire ticket dropped. 4 simple words for you. Snake in the court. A little background. I work in a small town. Our courthouse is old, and security isn't always tight. I was working a simple divorce. It was going amicably enough. We are just getting started on property division when the court report yelps and jumps up into her chair. She shouts, There's a snake in here. The whole courtroom is now freaking out. People are jumping up into their chairs or shouting that it was over in this part of the room. It was utter chaos for approximately 10 minutes before one of the bailiffs called out that he had it. I turned to face the man, and he is holding this snake. Thing had to be at least 3 feet long. Thankfully, it wasn't venomous. We waited until animal control came to collect the snake before proceeding. I was able to speak with the bailiff later and ask him how he caught the darn thing. He laughed and said he gets snakes in his house all the time and he knew it would be trying to run from all the noise. So, he walked over to the corner furthest away from everyone, and there it was, trying to climb the flagpole. He told me was glad it wasn't one of the venomous ones, said those are quicker to bite than others. I'm a criminal defense attorney. One of the first few cases I had was interrupted by chaos. The guy I was representing had a big mouth and was constantly talking crap. He was one of the worst clients I had. He refused to listen to me and was openly aggressive. He had prior assault charges and was currently in court for the next one. He was up on the stand and started to get mouthy again. The judge asked him to stop. His response was something I'm not willing to repeat. It included shoving certain things certain places. The judge, obviously, was upset about this guy's behavior. He held him in contempt. The judge went to bring down the gavel and missed the wooden block he was supposed to hit. The glass on the top of the desk shattered. All at once, my client grabbed a shard and went to attack the judge. That was a huge mistake. The judge happened to be a prize-winning boxer. The judge punched him in the face. The guy hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. My client was hauled off, and another charge was added to his offenses. He was convicted and given the maximum sentence for both charges. A word of advice: don't attack a judge. No judge will ever show you mercy for the rest of your life. I've had this one in my back pocket for a while. I was in the middle of my opening statements for some trial. Honestly don't remember the trail, but I remember this. I hear some commotion outside the courtroom. The doors suddenly burst open and a naked man runs in. He is climbing over chairs, people, tables, all while being chased by 2 officers. As he goes to run past me, I reach out and try to grab his arm. His arm slides right through my hand, leaving a thick greasy residue in its wake. The man was covered in Vaseline. He was sliding out of everyone's grip. It was hilarious. Even the judge was having a hard time keeping it together. He jumped up into the jury box and tripped. He landed in the lap of a very burly man. The guy was braver than the rest of us. He wrapped his arms around the guy and grabbed him by the genitals, none too gently according to the face the slippery man made. The bailiffs quickly collected him from the man. The judge called a recess and dismissed everyone. The bailiffs thanked the burly man for grabbing the guy. Apparently, he had spent some time as a bouncer and knew how to handle crazy. In his words, grabbing a man by his junk will stop him dead every time.